and the recording. Welcome everyone to our February Cabinet meeting. We are obviously live streaming. Some colleagues and officers are joining virtually, and that stream is now on, as is the recording. It's clearly a physical meeting taking place in the town hall. As always, all interactions, either virtually or in the room through me as chair, by raising a physical or electronic hand. Clearly all the decisions and the recording of the meeting will be uploaded afterwards, but there is a live stream currently on YouTube. I will ask Peter to read the protocol for participation in these types of meetings.
Thank you, Mayor. Please only speak when invited to by the chair. All participating members to keep the camera on during the proceedings unless they're having communication or connection issues. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communication via the chair. Please ensure officers remotely attending that your mics are muted when you're not speaking. If you're referring to a specific page or picture in the report, refer to the page number. If you're having technical difficulties, please use the chat function in Google Meet to alert the meeting. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the committee or making any other comments. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter. Just to also highlight to both members of the public, but also Cabinet colleagues, that this room is being used by our planning committee from 6:30. So I'm going to be very ruthless on protocol, which means that the public questions are as set out with no speeches introducing them. You will be asked if you want to make a supplementary question after the Cabinet member's response, and then I'll move on to the next public question and then move on to the rest of the agenda. And also we've got all three members of the public here, which is fantastic. Before we turn to the business of the meeting, I did just want to highlight that the two atria surrounding us have been lit in blue and yellow, the Ukrainian flag colours this evening. They'll be also lit in that way during full council on Wednesday. For members of the public at home, we don't actually have an external lighting system for the council buildings, but we are showing this form of solidarity with Ukrainian civilians, and obviously all of us are familiar with the aggressive attack that's taking place there since Thursday last week. Some of us in the council chamber obviously wearing solidarity rhythms as well. I know that only goes so far, but as I think I said in my statement on Friday, so many of our diverse communities in Hackney will have been through a similar experience in their diaspora stories, and I think they will be feeling this probably more than most. And as we have with Afghan refugees more recently, Syrians, Hong Kongers, the Vietnamese community I spent time with over the last couple of months, you know, this touches so many different communities and life experiences in Hackney, and I would hope that our approach to solidarity and sanctuary is extended to our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. I also do want to recognise that there are non-Ukrainian citizens trying to get out of Ukraine and into sanctuary and safety, and we've all seen some terrible and harrowing stories of racism, of people leaving Kiev and struggling on transport and also at the Polish and Romanian borders. And I hope that all of us would stand in solidarity with those citizens of other countries, and I hope by the midpoint of this week to have drafted a letter to the Home Secretary emphasising obviously our wish and support for any scheme that is launched nationally around refugees from the Ukrainian conflict, but also highlighting that European countries have a duty of care to other foreign nationals that are caught up in this terrible scenes. I will probably stop there and reserve obviously my more detailed remarks to full council on Wednesday, and as the situation develops and evolves, obviously we'll react as an authority, and we're ready to play our part in supporting Ukrainians or other nationals if they're in need of sanctuary and support. Those of us that are wearing the ribbons this evening are donating £5 to the Ukraine Red Cross appeal, and I'm sure people across the borough will be acting in their own way. And I know discussions are taking place both in the Faith Forum about a vigil tomorrow evening, but also many of the civil society organisations in Hackney are thinking about how they can respond to this crisis. And I hope that we will see, as I say, that really warm-hearted and deep response that Hackney's renowned for in the days and weeks ahead. Finally, obviously, terrible and disgusting scenes that we have seen, and I do hope that the peace talks in Belarus are successful. In terms of apologies for absence, I've had no apologies. I think I see every member of the Cabinet either in the room or online. I have had no notification of urgent items of business. Are there any additional declarations of interest? No. There's no intention to conduct business in private or any representations received beyond the exempt items. So item 5 is to consider any deputations, questions or petitions referred to Cabinet by the Council's monitoring officer. Those that will be familiar with our constitutional changes in January, we have made it easier, hopefully, for members of the public to ask questions at Cabinet and full Council. And we have 3 residents this evening. They are in the order, I think hopefully they're in the order notified to our resident colleagues. 5.1 is a question received from Ruth Parkinson to the Cabinet Member for Energy, Waste, Transport and Public Realm. Ms. Parkinson.
That one? Yep. Okay. Okay. Take my glasses off. That might help. Hackney Council commissioned an independent survey on LTNs by Opinion Research Services, which is closed. So could the council indicate where the results are published so residents can access it? And if unpublished, the date it will be published, and an explanation as to why it is not already available.
Thank you, Ruth. Councillor Cockburn.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth, for bringing this important question to Cabinet tonight. So, firstly, as everyone will be aware, the council has, in its plans to rebuild a greener Hackney, has launched, tens of news of school streets and low traffic neighbourhood schemes across the borough over the past 18 months, which has been part of a trial. And so far, we've seen very successful results of the low traffic neighbourhood schemes and also our school streets. We've seen that on average, with inside our LTNs, traffic is down by 38%, and of course by 2% on our main roads. But in terms of how we make the decisions on these schemes, we've obviously been following feedback from residents on common place consultation, where anyone can submit. We've obviously been monitoring traffic, both inside the LTNs and also on the boundary roads. Air quality is a big part of what we're doing and looking at that. And of course, road safety and bus performance data. And we obviously readily make these data available on a sort of periodically basis. Alongside this, what we're really passionate about is making sure that we're speaking to a representative group of people across Hackney. So therefore, we obviously commission an opinion research services to carry out a representative poll of Hackney residents. This has had some really interesting following feedback, and we're going to be making this publishing this week. What we have seen, which is fantastic, and it will be available on the website, is that we've seen an increase of 26% of respondents say that they're more encouraged to walk or run more as a result of Hackney's new low traffic neighbourhood streets and school streets. And 24% of respondents say they're more encouraged to cycle more. It also shows significant support for our aims to rebuild a greener Hackney programme, with 66% of people in support and 72% of people supporting all or some of our school streets to be made permanent. 79% of people were aware of our low traffic neighbourhoods streets near them, and of course 48% supported retaining all or some of the low traffic neighbourhoods. 47% wanted them to remove them, and 5% didn't know. So thank you to Ruth for bringing this question, and you'll be seeing this more in the public domain this week.
Thank you, Councillor Cockburn. So, Ruth, you've got 1 minute for a supplementary and then 2 minutes for a response.
Okay. The supplementary is, if you want to contact as many different people as you can, what was built into the new survey to make sure that you weren't duplicating information that you'd already got from the online Have a Say? Because as far as I know, the questions that were asked, people weren't asked if they'd already done one online, as far as I know. So how was that? Otherwise, you're going to be duplicating things. So you'll get answers from, instead of getting a wider range, you've got the same people answering the questions again.
That's a great follow-up question, and just allow me to sort of respond to that. So, firstly, I think the more data we have, the better it is.
But if it's duplicating, it's not
Yeah,
increasing it.
Well, we
That's
don't
what
know
I'm
if
saying.
it's duplicating. So the way it works is the commonplace consultation. Any one individual can go onto the website and respond. The reason why the experimental traffic order is a great platform, it's a great scheme actually, and partly the reason why the commonplace is a great scheme is because you as an individual who may sort of be supportive of the low traffic neighborhoods may go on there and, you know, drop your comments in the first instance. Sorry, if you allow me to respond, yeah. And then what you may do is you can update your views after 3 months or 6 months, and you have the opportunity to do that throughout the whole 18-month period. Now, what the polling does, now we don't have as much as demographic information around sort of the commonplace consultation because we don't know who is responding to the commonplace. So any one individual who has access to the online link can respond to that. So we don't know if they live in Hackney, if they live in Hackney, what the circumstances are. And what we're doing to strengthen that and to make more data publicly available is we're working with a professional research company who has a sampled survey of 1,000 people, which is the representative demographics of Hackney, and to try to get more sort of robust demographics across Hackney and get their views. So our view is that, you know, we're not saying either one of those things are a better one. What we're saying is the more data we have, the better it is for the public domain to be able to see what that data shows us.
I understand. Just one small thing. I already know that there are people who did the online survey who've also done this one, which is what's it called again? It's called the Opinion Research Services. So therefore, you've got duplication rather than expansion. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying that some of the data you've already got it through another method. That's all. And it would have been a golden opportunity in this to actually ask people, have you done an online survey? And I don't think anybody was asked. It was an opportunity missed. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
just very briefly to respond. Yeah. And look, you know, we'll take those comments on board for future sort of transport schemes. But what I would say is obviously, you know, the data helps us, and the more data, that better. So we'll make that publicly available this week, so you'll be able to see that. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much. Claire, to ask your question. If it's as set out, just say as set out, and then we can move into. If it is as set out, which is as the written tabled question, just say as set out, and then we can move to response, then your supplementary, etc., rather than reading it out.
Yes, except anybody listening online won't know the question.
There is that risk.
Yeah. So shall I? It's only 50 words.
Okay.
Okay. So my question was, do the cabinet members support the establishment of low traffic neighbourhoods that work by displacing traffic from areas with cleaner air onto roads where there are many of Hackney's most deprived schools, despite the council's own research stating, quote, schools on main roads are exposed to higher levels of air pollution, unquote.
Councillor Caban.
Thank you, Claire, for once again bringing this question. Obviously, we had the chance to speak on many occasions, and of course, I responded to a similar sort of question that you brought to the Health and Wellbeing Board as well. But welcome the opportunity to be able to respond again. So, as I say, Hackney has a number of low traffic neighbourhood schemes, and each one is introduced individually and evaluated on its own merits and impacts. The council is in the process of deciding whether we make these schemes permanent or not. And these are done through the monitoring that I mentioned to Ruth, which takes into account a number of different sort of data, which looks at traffic, air quality, all of those sort of areas which I'm at risk of repeating. And of course, one of the key primary aims of the low traffic neighbourhood schemes is to make sure that we're helping improve public health. The objectives is to reduce overall air pollution for the majority of people and to encourage active travel, because we know that in Hackney, we've got one of the worst levels of pollution in London, because we know that as a centrally located borough, there are lots of people who are driving through Hackney to get to where they need to. And we also know that for a study that was taken before, more than 40% of trips that take through in Hackney neither starts or ends in Hackney. And we have to find the fine balance between, you know, wanting to come and visit Hackney and visit your family and friends, and of course,
we know this. Can we answer the question? Is that possible?
Please don't interrupt.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And there needs to be that fair balance to make sure that our kids don't grow up with stunted lungs. Obviously, we've got a really robust program of school streets across Hackney, 48 school streets where we've seen a reduction of tailpipe emissions outside of school gates by 74%. But obviously measuring these impacts, is complicated and relies on a number of different indicators. And not all of this is available at the household level. Postcode-based health data, for example, can include a main road, but also an adjacent side street. It is known from widespread research that most of the impacts of the scheme, good or bad, have a causational link to traffic levels. For this reason, the majority of monitoring effort has been directed at traffic counts. These have been done at nearly 300 locations and 24 continuous counters using artificial intelligence to include pedestrian and cycle counts have been introduced across the borough. To guide the decision of whether to make the experimental order permanent, a full and comprehensive report is to complete for each scheme. Each report contains an equality impact assessment of each scheme. As part of this, schools and other sensitive receptors are considered in detail. Analysis of air quality, road safety, and bus impact is also included. To date, one of these, or actually three of these, Homerton Low Traffic Neighbourhood Scheme, the Hackney Downs, and of course the Hoxton West LTN, has been completed and made publicly available on the website, and we'll obviously share those links with you after this meeting. And this provides an idea of where the level of detail of evaluation goes into the scheme. These evaluations include detailed air quality analysis, although air quality is not the only factor in determining the health impact of the schemes. In relation to the schools in the most deprived areas mentioned in the question, in Hackney, a high percentage of people from Black, Asian, and minority backgrounds live within LTNs compared to white people. 40 to 50% of people who live within LTNs live on social housing, a record that we're very proud of in Hackney. People living in LTNs are more likely to be deprived more than half the national population than in than more affluent half. As of September 21, traffic on LTN boundary roads in Hackney were down 2% compared to pre-pandemic levels, broadly similar to the trend in general background traffic levels on the borough's main roads. The new low traffic neighbourhoods in 2020 and 2021 added to the existing 20 or so LTNs, some dating back to the 1970s, and were implemented in line with guidance from the Department for Transport for London, and are consistent with the Healthy Streets approach, public health recommendations from the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, and the World Health Organization's Health and Transport Research. The new LTNs were introduced using the experimental traffic orders to allow that 18 months for us to be able to properly monitor that data. Public Health is working with the pollution control officers to monitor the impact of air pollution on residents' health, specifically from nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter in the form of PM10 and PM2. These are the pollutants most associated with emissions from motor vehicles. We'll be looking at potential impacts, both positive and negative, that the implementation of the LTNs have had on our air pollutant levels, and what this means for public health of Hackney residents. This is being done using Hackney's extensive air quality monitoring network, and now a map of the network can also be found online, in which I may add is the first type of its kind for any London borough. The monitored and modelled results are compared to air quality objectives to determine what the impact on air pollutant levels from the implementation on LTNs means for public health. The analysis of potential impacts from the implementation of LTNs on air pollutant concentration levels and public health are found in the LTN decision papers, which will be made public and have already been made public for some of the schemes. For wider air quality monitoring data collected across Hackney, please see the annual status reports, which I'll be sharing with you later in my written response. And you can also find more information on our air quality action plan. Chair, I can go on and on and on. I think we've kind of gathered what I've been trying to say. Yeah.
Members of the public watching, Claire does have another public question at full council on Wednesday as well. Claire, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I just want to focus again on the list of schools that are on the main roads. And in the council's previous statements, they said there was a high concern about the high level of pollution in those schools. There's about 15 primary schools, 10 secondary schools, and Ickberg that are all a special school, all on the main roads to which traffic has been displaced. On top of that, there's about 15 or 16 early years provisions. As you know, Minik Kardesh is one of my local ones, and I'm concerned about the children there, as well as Rooftop and a few of the others. So it's about that displacement where there had already been a recognition of a problem. And the LTNs, and you keep talking about children's lungs, and, you know, as somebody who has, you know, children and has, been in education for years. I'm very concerned about it as well, but I'm concerned about all the children. What we're seeing, you said it in your own speech about Northwall, the displacement there. Those children have been living for 18 months.
Are you coming to a question?
Yes, so I want to know what we're specifically, sorry, Philip, what we're specifically doing about the children in those schools. We have had a closure of one main road to benefit the children at William Patton. And my question is, why are the children on other roads, in schools on other roads not being treated equally?
Well,
Thanks very much, Claire.
I'm very
Councillor
glad
Coburn.
that Claire has accepted that Hackney has an issue with air pollution. It's something that we take very, very seriously as a council, and that's exactly the reason why we launched a program of low traffic neighbourhood schemes and, of course, the school streets. No one has ever pretended that the low traffic neighbourhood schemes is the only answer to tackling the air pollution that we have in Hackney. What we have seen is we've seen very decisive action on what we can do to help improve or tackle toxic air pollution. As I've given some stats to you before around sort of the improvement of air quality, and you can find that for Hoxton West, the Homerton LTM, but also for the Hackney Downs low traffic neighbourhood too. And in relation to the action that we're taking on main roads, you've just mentioned Church Street. That's the start of a bigger programme that we want to see in Hackney, where we can tackle toxic air pollution on main roads. But we've also seen a reduction of traffic on main roads by 2%. Now, that's not to say, Claire, that we're always going to get it right. What we've always been clear about is that we need to judge each scheme on its merits. That's why we make every single data publicly available, and we will make changes where necessary, as we have just done. And as I have just announced on the Hackney Downs low traffic neighbourhood, we do accept that there's been an increase on traffic on Norfolk Road, whilst there has been a reduction on Rectory Road and Upper Clapton Road. But what we have committed to residents on Norfolk Road is that we want to have a long-term conversation about how we can reduce traffic and help tackle toxic air pollution. But just last word, Chair, the answer to tackling the toxic air pollution that we have is not to allow more cars to go through. What we do need to do is to see less people driving through Hackney to get to where they need to. And we also need to see people driving less short in terms of short trips, and obviously take up more public transport, cycling and walking. And what we do know in Hackney is that more than 87% of people in Hackney either walk, cycle and take public transport. But thank you, Claire, for bringing this question to the Cabinet.
Thanks, Claire, and obviously look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Imogen, your question, please.
Thank you. Can people? Yes, it's working. Good. So, my main question is, what is being done to mitigate the harm to groups already disproportionately impacted by the secondary effects of motor vehicle use? And I'm specifically thinking of those residents of the boundary roads created by the LTNs, including those on low incomes and people of minority ethnic backgrounds, the elderly and children. So those groups have been identified by the council as in need of protection.
Thank you, Imogen. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you very much for your question, Imogen. Hackney recognises the negative impacts of motor vehicle use, such as air pollution, road danger, congestion and related physical inactivity. It is also true that that those on low incomes and people of minority ethnic backgrounds, which we like to call the global majority, the elderly and the children are disproportionately impacted by these things. Hackney has an extensive mitigation strategies and programs as set out in Hackney's transport strategy focused around model shift, road safety education and motor traffic reduction. The strategy includes schemes such as low traffic neighbourhoods that have proven to benefit the groups highlighted in the question. In my previous response, you would have heard that more than 40 to 50% of people living within the low traffic neighbourhood schemes are on social housing. And we also know those from deprived backgrounds are more likely to live within our low traffic neighbourhood schemes. We prioritise active and sustainable transport such as buses, trains, walking and cycling. Hackney Council supports bus priority to protect bus speeds and lobbies TfL for the protection and expansion of the bus network. That's because we know that the majority of people in Hackney either walk, cycle and take public transport. And we also know that only a third of households own vehicles in Hackney. Buses are particularly important as data indicates that people on low incomes and people from ethnic minority backgrounds are more likely to use this mode of transport. Hackney is developing a borough-wide electric vehicle charging network strategy to encourage switch to less polluting vehicles, which will help hopefully tackle toxic air pollution and improve air quality. The council also promotes car clubs, which not only help reduce private car ownership, but also provide a more equitable access to cars and vans for when people need to use motorized vehicles and travel. Electric car clubs are key as they help ensure that all residents are able to participate in the transition to electric vehicles. Thank you very much for bringing this question.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Do you have a supplementary, Imogen?
I do, yes. Okay, does the council accept that residents of some of Hackney's busiest roads, especially vulnerable groups and children, are now experiencing, I mean, I live on Graham Road, and I can tell you the traffic is 3 or 4 times worse since the introduction of the LTNs, and very noisy throughout the night. So those already busy roads that are now experiencing much more pollution since the LTN introduction, mainly due to idling vehicles and congestion at busy times. Does the council accept that these residents have an equal right to clean air as the residents living inside the clean air LTN zones? And how is the council proposing to protect these residents in terms of real-time clean air monitoring? And because I live on Graham Road, clearly I'm concerned about Graham Road and Dalston Lane, but I also am in touch with a lot of residents who are very unhappy about the LTN schemes because they live on or near Morning Lane, Homerton High Street. So how is the council proposing to protect these residents and monitor air on these very busy roads?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that follow-up question. What Hackney Council does accept, as you rightly say, is that every single resident in Hackney should benefit from clean air and greener neighbourhoods, and that's one of the things that we're heavily pursuing. What we have said, and what I've said in my previous answers too, is that we're going for a programme. We've just published our air quality action plan. We're going for a programme of different measures, 47 ways in which how we outline that we're going to tackle toxic air pollution in the borough. We've just made, and what's really important to that, Imogen, is making sure that that data is available so you and other residents can see and be judges of that. And of course, it helps inform our decision making in terms of how we make changes. Now, what I have said to Claire in the previous question as well, we do accept that not every single scheme, or there may be displacement in some areas, and what we're looking at is how we can make those changes. We have already made some changes, for example, on the Hackney Downs low traffic neighbourhood. We've obviously made the blue badge exemption, for example, on the Hoxton West, and we've obviously introduced that in the Stoke Newington Church Street scheme as well. So what we want to do is we want to work with you and others who feel that way, and to try to find out how we can make sure that we can address some of the concerns that you have realised. We are going to be publishing more data in relation to the London Fields low traffic neighbourhood, which specifically refers to Graham Road. And what we want to see is we want to see reduced car usage so that you and your neighbouring residents don't have to suffer from bad air pollution. But the answer to that is obviously to reduce car usage in Hackney. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Thank you to Ruth, Imogen and Claire. Appreciate you taking the time to come this evening for your questions. We will move on. We have item 6 is the unrestricted minutes of Cabinet held on 24th of January. Are we happy to approve the minutes? Agreed. Item 7 is the budget and council tax report, clearly a really big substantive decision. As I introduced the report, I have to remind members that Appendix 11 of the 2022-23 budget and council tax report was marked following. It's been published online and circulated to members. That's the update on the corporate plan, which makes very interesting reading about the impact of our investment and response to the pandemic and cyber attack. Members are also reminded that the calculation of the council tax base is covered by Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. I think the camera angles might be wrong. The main feed doesn't appear to, no, don't worry. There we go. The Local Government Act 1992, this provides that if a member owes 2 or more months arrears of council tax, they're obliged to disclose this fact to the meeting and not vote on the matter. Failed to comply as a criminal offence, published by a fine. I'm reliably informed no one in this room is liable to that fine, but I have to obviously read it out. I'm not going to do a big introduction because the main budget debate will be on Wednesday at full council, and there isn't time to do so anyway. I would just like to put on record my thanks, as is traditional, to Group Director Ian Williams, but also all of the CLT corporate leadership team. I think especially Councillor Chapman for the work that you've done. I know scrutiny and audit colleagues and backbench colleagues have been fully involved in the process. And obviously, it goes without saying, Deputy Mayors and Cabinet colleagues, your effort and work. This is a very difficult budget in the sense that we're in a one-year settlement after a period of immense amount of change for the council, huge flows of money coming in and out during the COVID period. Obviously, we've had that criminal cyber attack, and now we're going into a deep, deep cost of living crisis. At the time these papers were obviously written, we were facing an energy crisis, we were facing the return of inflation. We still obviously have issues around the welfare and benefit system, and now we have war on Europe's borders that will no doubt make all of those issues even worse. So I think it's absolutely right that it's a prudent and stable budget in that context. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Councillor Chapman. I also just to recognise that there'll be a roll call vote once Councillor Chapman has added to my introduction to the report.
No, Chair. I'll say more when we have a full council meeting later in the week. Just to say, obviously, I support and endorse everything that's set out in this report.
Thanks very much, Peter.
And Deputy Mayor Bramble. Thank you. Councillor Cobain. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Frizzen Thomas. Councillor Kennedy. Deputy Mayor Nicholson. Councillor Woodley. Thank you.
4 as well.
Councillor.
Don't worry. I think that means we've agreed the recommendations and it can proceed to council. Sorry, Peter. Camera. Thank you. So it can proceed to council on Wednesday when we'll have a fuller debate. And we obviously, with bated breath, look forward to the amendments from the opposition that I'm sure are well established and in train for Wednesday. Item 8 is the overall financial position. Councillor Chapman, do you want to introduce the report?
Just very briefly to say, I ask you to note that the work that we're doing in making sure that costs are contained within the within the overspend already reported are successful, and it's important that that work continues. And to draw your attention that the report also asks you to agree some constitutional changes in relation, not our constitution, in relation to the London Housing Consortium Joint Committee as set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. And I think it's probably just worth adding on the LHC changes that we want to try and work with the London Housing Consortium and other London boroughs to find a solution for the organisation. Myself, Councillor John Thomas and Councillor Mackenzie at different points have served on the board, and obviously public sector owned procurement is something that should be the direction of travel we're moving into, but for the reasons set out in the report, it's not appropriate for us to host the organisation. Are we happy to agree the OFP? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. Item 9 is the capital update in my name. I very, very briefly wanted to highlight in the report, obviously, there is continuing investment in the borough's infrastructure, including public realm, but also to highlight the very welcome investment in SEND provision in the borough. And I know that Councillor Woodley and I will be highlighting that in other ways during the course of the upcoming week. But again, a big capital programme that makes an incredible difference to the borough. I think regrettably the uploaded report might be last month's report, certainly in the version that I'm viewing. I don't know if that's the same problem other colleagues have, but it doesn't appear to be the report from this month. I don't know if other colleagues are having the same problem. Actually, that's my mistake. I've cleared both capital reports, and it's next month's reports, Councillor Woodley, that has the send investment. Tonight we're investing in Hoxton Street and in Stoke Newington Church Street in the property deal there. So I hold my thunder for the next cabinet meeting, and apologies for the error. We're moving at such a pace. We've got 2 capital updates out there, but there is really significant investment in our borough's infrastructure here, and obviously the tree planting work and public realm. I hope we can agree it, and sorry for scaring everyone momentarily there and getting ahead of ourselves. Are we happy to agree the report? Great, and we look forward to the next report where we're doing send. Item 10 is the GLA grant funding agreement. Deputy Mayor Nicholson, do you want to introduce the report?
And to be brief, Mayor Glanville, if I may, this is just recognising that officers are bringing to us £17.5 million of affordable housing grant, which has come from the Mayor of London and the Mayor of London's affordable housing programme for 2021 through to 2026. We are hoping that that will enable the delivery of 100 new council homes in the borough in the years ahead, Mayor Glanville, and this is just asking us to agree to enter into the funding agreement with the Mayor of London to release that £17.5 million grant, and you will just see in recommendations 3.2 that to do that, we just need to agree to adopt the new shared ownership model that's come down from the Mayor of London and sign up to the Service Charges Charter as a condition. And then finally, just to kind of reassure, as things currently stand, this £17.5 million hasn't been allocated in the housing delivery programme, the new homes delivery programme, and that will be subject to a further report to come to Cabinet in due course towards the beginning of the new administration. Glanville. And finally, just to place on record, thanks to officers for leading on this submission and indeed a set of negotiations, and for their quite kind of professional and extraordinary persuasive powers with colleagues at the GLA. Thank you very much indeed, officers. The report is as set out. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. I extend my thanks again to Chris James and their teams that have worked together on this work, and also Ian and Simon, who provided that finance support. Are we happy to agree the report? Agreed. So item 11 is what will be a new regular update from our housing companies to Cabinet. And here is our first update. I think it's just worth, in an introduction to the report, just recalling the origin of our housing companies and why they exist. There was a first Cabinet report in July 2019, where we outlined the business plan to purchase 25 properties from Anthology, our delivery partners, on some of the private sale homes at Colville. And this report follows that business plan to purchase those homes and updates Cabinet and the broader council on the work of our housing companies and the request plan transfer for council funds to those companies. The transfer is set out in the company's 25-year business plan and enable the companies to establish a portfolio of homes to support the Hackney Living Rent model. And all of our activities in these housing companies are designed to deliver Hackney Living Rent. That is their primary purpose. But obviously, when we let our homes at private full rent, we're doing so in line with the better renting principles that have been established by myself and Mayoral Advisor Marima. The audited council annual report are set out as well, and there are no adverse impacts on their activities, and obviously they're proceeding to deliver in that way. The Cabinet back in 2018 established the 2 wholly owned companies which are not for profit and may deliver the living rent side of those homes. And just to remind colleagues that Hackney Living Rent is designed to be set at a third of household income. Our 8 Hackney Living Rent homes have all been let and continue to be let at Bridge House in Homerton. They're targeted at people that may be key workers, but actually the primary criteria is around income levels rather than having that tight restrictive view of what a key worker is. And it's also very important to say that we are about to establish more Hackney living rent homes in Hackney Downs at Gooch House, which will be an important part of our mix. The surplus, obviously, of the private rent homes go into supplying more and more Hackney living rent homes. And the whole reason, obviously, for having a company structure is the council can't let homes at private rent models within the HRA. You have to let at a social rent. And obviously, we're really proud of our council house building programme, as Deputy Mayor Nicholson just outlined, and we continue to expand that programme. But there are lots of people that aren't eligible for council housing or social housing in the borough, and we want to make sure that we provide a route through into secure housing for those. Just to say, the future of the companies and their activities are going to be reviewed by the council. This is an annual process to report back to Cabinet. We weren't able to do that last year for a variety of reasons, but this should be a report that Cabinet get on an annual basis. So please see the recommendations as sort of signalling those next steps in that future work. Councillor Marima, I think you've indicated from the virtual wall.
I have, yes. Thank you so much, Mayor Glanville. And I'm really pleased that in spite of the pandemic, this is something that we've managed to establish a principle here in Hackney. I know there will be questions from members of the public about how people who are not on the housing list and can't afford to buy can stay in the borough that they have been born and raised in. And this is one of the ways that we are trying to demonstrate that principle. We're only 15% of the way there, but in the next administration, I really hope that this council, both politicians and its officers, are able to make sure that we can begin to fill that gap. 36,000 households are waiting for some security, and this is just a really great way to prove that we can do that. We can provide security, we can provide a rent control, and we can make sure that people can stay put and afford to live and work here.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mayoral Advisor Marima. Are we happy to agree the report and note the recommendations? Thank you. Moving on to making everyone Deputy Mayor this evening. Apologies for the actual Deputy Mayors. Deputy Mayor Bramble and Councillor Woodley, just to say the 13 minutes left, so please be brief on your introductions.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. I thought, as with increasing deputy mayors, I thought, my goodness, holiday time off is what arose in that space. So yes, just introducing the paper on the education sufficiency and estate strategy. And basically it's just a strategic look across the borough about the falling roll numbers and how we as a council are working with schools to seek to address that. Really some great visits with the Mayor Glanville, just visiting all of our schools actually, as schools are open and running, as you know, although as we know, schools didn't close, alongside Councillor Woodley as well. And it's just setting out how we're going to take a strategic approach of what we're going to do. Falling roll numbers have been impacted by many of things, whether it's Brexit, whether it's families not being able to stay in the borough because they can't afford to live here, or families making the decision to move out of borough, maybe to sell a nice flat and a balcony and get in a home out in the country somewhere. I think the cap in the housing benefit has also had an impact on roll numbers and families moving in and out of temporary accommodation. So there's an array of things that have arisen there. I would note that it's not a Hackney issue, it's a London-wide, and also speaking to colleagues outside of London, there are issues there. The important thing to say is that we are taking a strategic look, and part of that is increasing in-borough provision for special educational needs, and it's been a real pleasure to work alongside Councillor Woodley. I nearly made you Deputy Mayor as well, Councillor Woodley, and obviously the Mayor for his input in this throughout. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville and Deputy Mayor Bramble. Yeah, I think you can see in the appendices to this paper the beginning of, I guess, the next wave of work that we're doing to increase places for SEND in borough, in Hackney. Phase 1A, as we're putting it, is set out to try and meet our most urgent needs. We know that's within autism and social, emotional and mental health. So we're moving to a feasibility stage, which we hope will produce 98 places. That will be on top of the 84 places that we've achieved in recent years. So very excited to progress with that if adopted by Cabinet.
Thanks very much, both. Are we happy to agree the report? I've just seen Councillor Stopps walk through, so I think our time is drawing to a close. The item 13 is lease on Cape House. There is an exempt appendix. If we move into that, we obviously have to move into a later closed session. I'm assuming that we can take it all as one. Now, the substantive work here has been done by Councillor Ette, the Housing Needs Service and our property colleagues. It is a really, really big step forward in improving the quality of accommodation in the borough. I do just want to give Councillor Ette 30 seconds to add to my remarks and just to thank her for her tireless efforts in this area.
For your contribution as well. I mean, there's no doubt, despite the fact of the crisis that we're facing, we're still building in Hackney. And with regards to this particular temporary accommodation, it will drive up the standard of the type of our accommodation, especially in Dustin and parts of that borough. And it will further alleviate some of the pressures on the council with regards to the immediate, and definitely improve the quality and range of temporary accommodation in the borough. So, I mean, no doubt, this proposal is good for the council, is good for the local community, and most importantly, some of the most vulnerable residents in the borough who may end up needing this accommodation. So I commit this report to the Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Ette. Are we happy to agree the recommendations? Agreed. Item 14 will be down phase 4 in my name. Again, thank you to Chris and his team. This actually is one of those papers that triggers a huge amount of work rather than says that we have finished a piece of work. And I'd just like to credit the Woodbury Down Regeneration team, but also recognise the contribution that Housing Needs and other professional parts of the council will have to do to work through phase 4. I think the most exciting thing in introduction is just to say that phase 3, which is currently on site, sees the delivery of 100 plus social rented homes. That provides all of the necessary homes for the decant of secure social tenants in phase 4. And as we move into the future discussions around the phase 4 master plan work, also, as well as the delivery of more social rented homes in phase 4, we're going to see the final delivery of an amazing new public square and associated social and retail infrastructure, which I hope, going by the blog that I've published this afternoon, will include a new library cultural hub for Woodbury Down, which is a really exciting step forward. And also, we have been doing extensive work across the partnership to protect trees and green infrastructure in phase 4. Beyond that, as set out, and are we happy to agree the recommendations? Thanks, everyone. Agreed. Councillor Nicholson, the adoption of the North London Waste Plan 15, or have I got an old agenda? I think I've got an old agenda. Good. Well, I'm doing well this evening. So I think then it's the school governor's appointment at 15. That's it. I've just checked the names and I don't recognise James or Nicholas, but it's the last opportunity of any Cabinet colleagues to recognise them in their declarations. If not, I will hand over to Deputy Mayor Bramble to introduce her report.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Just to reiterate what I always say, thanking governors for the time that they dedicate to govern and be part of our governing school bodies. They have been instrumental in the work that we've done throughout the pandemic, supporting leadership teams and ensuring that we do the best for our children. And it's just, yes, if they are new governors, I'd advise them to go online and take part in all of the support that we offer governors. Thank you.
Can I just echo that thanks for all of our governors. Obviously welcome the appointment. We ran into some school governors, didn't we, in our school visits last week, and they do an incredible service to the borough, our communities and our schools. On that note, we're happy to appoint school governors as tabled. Agreed. There are no new items of unrestricted urgent business. I don't have to exclude the press and public because we've dealt with that under item 13. I think that brings us to a close, and Councillor Stopes won't be dragging us out of the council chamber. So thank you very much for attending, especially our residents this evening, and look forward to see you on Wednesday at full council. Thanks, everyone.